Well, welcome back. Welcome back. I'm Willie Lightfoot.
And I am Lovely Warren.
And we are the hosts of the Love and Light podcast, where we talk about things that people don't talk about nearly enough or don't talk about at all. And we're here to talk about a topic that I think a lot of people are going to be able to relate to. We received some calls and some comments from some of our listeners and viewers, and we're gonna ask those questions today from some of our listeners and viewers, and we're gonna try to dive into what we're calling healing the divide, coping with estranged family and friends. Now, last time, Lovely, we talked about the PAB. But then we got a lot of feedback and comments about the show we did on how to recognize toxic people in your life. And this show kind of spins off of that based on the questions that we received. And so we're going to go into that. But before we go into that, I think you wanted to do another love segment.
Yes. I don't know if everybody's seen the movie Sinners with producer Ryan Coogler and Michael B. Jordan. But that movie has been taking the world by storm, just breaking all records, all numbers. And it can be controversial because, they do talk about the church. And they have many symbolic messages that are in this film. But I thought, I went to see it and I thought it was very, very powerful. It's one of those things that, you have to look deep into. It's not just everything on the surface because, they portrayed it as a horror movie, with vampires and things like that. But, I think that as you watch it, you see something that's completely different, completely not at all as, horrific as, it was made to seem. But I think that Ryan Coogler and Michael B. Jordan did a wonderful, wonderful job with this film.
Well, good. Kudos to that. I have not seen the movie yet. I've heard a lot of things about it. And so we'll see. We'll have to check it out. So today, episode 42, this is powered by 103.9 WDKX. We're talking about healing the divide. We're talking about coping with estranged family and friends. And I think many of us can relate, right? Can we relate to like the fact that we all, if you haven't, I would just say keep on living. And you experienced situations of estrangements from people that maybe you used to deal with and you don't deal with anymore, or family. And I would say it's probably as most difficult, I would think, with family than with anybody else. And so we're going to dive into some questions, but just your initial thoughts on just the topic itself.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the topic is a very challenging one, right? And so when you think about what we talked about with toxic people, certain things happen within family members, but I think that a lot of times it stems from a place, many times from being misunderstood, and not being able to have that heart-to-heart conversation without having hard feelings and things like that. And when you're family, you automatically think, oh, well, this person is supposed to take my side. If I ain't talking to them, you ain't talking to them either, right? But, on some level, you have to be able to have those tough conversations, especially with their family members that does not go all the way one way, all the way left. And, when you see it happen in that way, you need to be able to bring it back or to say like, hey, listen, I love you. I love you. Above all thing, blood is thicker than water. So let us just take a break, come back when we calm down and we can talk about it in a different way.
So we had a couple of our listeners and viewers that wrote in, and this is what one of them said. It says, I want to forgive my family member for how they've hurt me, but I still feel angry. How do I start healing without feeling like I'm excusing their behavior? That's deep.
Yeah, I think that it is deep. And, a lot of times I think that, it's first respecting the fact that if that family member comes back to you and say, you know what, I'm sorry. Right. And when that person
can I stop you right there though?
Okay.
We might have to come back in part 2 on this because listen, you said you said that you went it real quickly, but it's very, very important. You said number one, if that family members, and to be honest with you, the estrangement, hurt, pain when it comes to family, friends, associates, etc. And what I've seen and experienced in my own personal life, that's oftentimes where the problem stops right there, because you got people sometimes who walk so much in pride that they will never say, I'm sorry. Right. They never admitted that they do. And there lies a problem, right? What if you're dealing with a person who ain't never, and we all got people we know like this, or somebody could be listening, could be one of those people who never do nothing wrong. Everybody else is always wrong. They always right. They never see your side. They never are empathetic of what you, how you see or how you feel. It's all about just them. And how do you deal with that type of situation where a person doesn't think they did nothing? They ain't do hurt you. They
can't
wrong.
See their fault, right?
Yes.
In the matter. And I would say you're not forgiving them for them. You're forgiving them for you, right? And that is that your heart and your conscience and your person is clear. Your soul is clear, because it's not about forgiveness. Is not necessarily about the person that offended you. It's about you being able to accept and say, you know what? I know that person did me wrong, or I feel like that person did X, Y, and Z, and they may never say sorry. Doesn't mean that you have to deal with them. Doesn't mean that y'all have to, kumbaya and go skipping down the road together. But you can say, be in that room with that person and, be okay with them and say hi and speak, but where that person is. And, it's going to be up to them to come to the realization that your relationship and your friendship that you had was so important to them that they will recognize that, hey, you know what, if we were tight and all of a sudden things just went left over a misunderstanding, or because I feel like, or because we got into it and you did something wrong and you never come back, I'm going to try to give that person the benefit of the doubt. Because what I do, I know your heart. I know where you're at. And
I also know if you foul.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
Let's just keep it 100, right?
Yeah.
And also know if you foul.
Right.
So those who have a strange, and that's one thing I like about what they said. They said, how do I start healing without feeling like I'm excusing their behavior? So in this incident, the person could be in a situation where I know you foul. I know we all have friends, family members, associates, people who always got something going on or negative, or when they come around, they suck the life out of the room, so to speak, and then we typically, sometimes we do forgive their behavior. Oh, that's just so-and-so. That's just the way they are. Or they'll tell you this, but you got to accept it. But do I really have to accept it though?
I mean, you don't have to deal with it, right? But that person's but then you're not in charge of someone else's behavior.
That's right.
And what I think that we try to do is I want to control your response. I want to control what you do and how you respond to what I did to you, right?
Yes.
And you can't control the consequences for your behavior.
You can't
for their behavior.
I agree. You can't control the consequences. However, in this question, how do I start healing without feeling like I'm excusing the perfect? So what I would say to that is what you're saying. You do have to take the benefit of the doubt, allowing healing to start by you forgiving, because that's controlling you. You can't control other people. However, though, when things become unhealthy for you, then I believe that's what you do have control over. You have control over yourself. Now, I'm not trying to control somebody else's behavior, but that's where the estrangement comes from. Because if I have to protect my peace, protect my health, protect my well-being, which should be the number one priority for everybody. Self-preservation should be, because if you can't help nobody else, if you're help, hurt people. So, my thing is, if you have to remove yourself from certain individuals that are unhealthy for you, or remove yourself from certain situations, and this could even be family members, children, people that you love. The Bible says your greatest foe will be those of your own household. Yeah. People don't typically want to understand. They say, well, wow, my God, what does that mean? It means who better yet to hurt you than the person that's most closest to you. That's the one that's going to hurt you, or could hurt you, or have the opportunity to hurt you to most. So don't think it's strange because the individuals that you've allowed into your inner circle are the same ones potentially who have hurt you and who you may be potentially get in conflict with, because that makes sense. why would you care about somebody you don't even know or somebody you have no relationship with? How would they even, be able to penetrate, your heart or your spirit or
feelings
your feelings
about
it was not even, I'm saying, something that's realistic. But in this case, I agree with you. The forgiveness starts first with yourself. You have to be in a position to say, no matter what, I want to be in a better place, right? So I'm going to forgive this person and give them the opportunity, the benefit of the doubt. Hopefully they can apologize, or somebody gets to apologize to each other. Maybe oftentimes some of that is apology for one another. But I think communication is what we're talking about, is critical. People have to be willing to communicate, and communication goes both ways.
Right.
People have to be willing to sit down, be honest about whatever is going on, or whatever the communication may have been, or the misunderstanding may have been. Everybody put it on the table and be honest about what's going on. Now we have another question. So question number 2 was, I want to reconnect with an estranged friend, but I worry it might lead to more pain. How can I tell if a healthy step, and what should I do to decide to reach out?
Our listeners is going deep here, right?
Yeah.
I would say in that situation, before you make that phone call, just be in the mindset that this might not go the way that you want it to go. Doesn't mean that you don't make that call, right? But it may not go the way that you want it to go, right? So when I was in law school, I had a friend that I went to college with, things like that, and we fell out for a little while over relationship choices and things like that. I felt like she deserved better, and things ultimately didn't work out with the guy, and after everything was said and done, when she reached out, I was like, hey, I was excited to hear from her. Like, hey, how you doing? What's going on? And all of that. Because at the end of the day, the situation wasn't between me and her, right? We loved each other. We were like sisters. We, was ride or die, but it was a man that came between us, where I felt like, this person doesn't deserve your goodness, right? And at the time, she didn't see it. And and I knew that, okay, well, I'm just going to give you a space, right? That sometimes you have to let people walk the road that they're going to walk. And then, but when we reconnected, it was as if we never were disconnected, right? And we still talk to this day. And so what I'm saying is that I could have been negative and be like, like, what's this shit calling me for? Like, when we were yada, 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 then when we were friends and all that, but you chose him over me type of thing. But at the end of the day, for me, it wasn't such a massive situation that I felt like we can't talk about it, right? And sometimes you'll be surprised if you make that phone call and that person accepts the phone call, that person is excited to hear from you and is ready to move on because they miss the relationship, right? The same way that you do.
And I think, what you're saying is important. Also, one, it could not go the way you wanted to go, but also realizing that reconnecting could be less about returning to what was and more about building a new, healthier path forward, right? How do we move past where we were into even a better space, right? But I think what lets you know if it's a healthy decision is what is the impact of that reconnection. If that reconnection takes you back down a path of pain, sorrow, destruction, and trauma, then it's not a healthy decision. It's not a healthy path to continue going forward. And I know with family, and many of our listeners and viewers, I'm sure, can connect with this. There's some family member, there's some, it may even be your children that may have been estranged from, and you keep trying to figure out a way to reconnect it, figure out a way. And every time you put your hands in it, we say in the church, let God do it. Don't put your hand, when you put your hands in it, then things tend to get messed up. But it seems like it's just a reciprocating problem every time that you keep trying to take a step forward. It doesn't stop you from trying to take those steps forward.
Right.
But I always tell people, it's all about what's healthy though. If it's a traumatic situation, abuse comes in many forms.
Yes.
It doesn't, nobody has to hit you upside the head for you to hurt. Words hurt. Treatment hurts. And those things could really impact you, your health, your well-being. And at the end of the day, I think that's what should be most important to individuals is mind, body, and spirit, your psychological, your spirit, your body, and taking care of yourself. You can't help nobody else if you can't help yourself. So if you start dealing with these situations that become traumatic in these reconnections, then you got to disconnect.
Right. And yes, if the situation starts going down the same path that it was on, then you know that this isn't a relationship that you need to cultivate. It's not a relationship that you need to be in at all, right? Sure. And so you can safely remove yourself. But I would say that it is don't be afraid to try.
I agree.
You know, especially with family.
Yes.
Especially with those friendships and relationships that mean a lot to you or have meant a lot to you, right? Because it is important that you do, you know, try to find forgiveness, if not for yourself, or for them. And people may never apologize because they may never feel like they did anything wrong. But as you know, when these certain things happen, right, everybody has a side, right?
Yes.
Everybody, you did this to me.
There's two sides,
but you did this, right? And then there's the truth. And so, is there a common ground? Is there a middle that you guys can walk down because the relationship is important to you? But that's a two-sided thing. You can't do it all by yourself.
That's right. That's right. Episode 42, we're talking about healing the divide. Yes. Coping with estranged family and friends. And we talked so much about, we answered those questions, or we discussed those questions, but we didn't get a lot into the healing of the divide. And there's a divide that's happening in our community, I believe, between the baby boomers, the Z's. I think that's a part of estrangement, if you will, or dividing that I see and I'm recognizing in our community. We're trying to build bridges and not walls with our young people, and between the young people and the older people. And we see, especially I see it even in the church now, especially post-pandemic, you know, we're seeing this divide somewhat, seems like it's getting larger within our community. And so we want to encourage people, like you said, you got to try, you got to take those steps forward in order to be able to build those bridges in relationships, because everything's relational, right? So when we look at these questions, it reminds us of the steps, all of these steps of forgiveness and reconnection is deeply personal, right?
It is
deeply
personal. So personal,
and it's important that we got to respect people's emotions, their boundaries, and remember that healing is a process.
Yes.
Right.
And you have to be willing to give people space, right? Because sometimes when you're ready to deal with something, that other person is not ready to deal with it, right? And I think that a lot of times you're trying, you want to force the issue, you know, even in marriage and in relationships and things like that. You know, my husband often talks about, you know, when we're in a thick of an argument, he'll dead it, right? And we're not going to talk about this right now, right? I'm not going to talk about this right now because this argument is going someplace where it doesn't need to go, right? And so, and then I'm going to get mad, right? Because I'm a woman.
That's
and,
what women.
You're
going to talk about this.
I want to talk about it right now. We going to get this out of the.
Hey, I've been married for 30 years, so I know.
Listen, no, we're not going to talk about this right now.
Got to go to a cool space,
right? And so.
Smart.
In that factor, you have to recognize that somebody has to be the cool-headed one, the level one, the one that says, all right, I'm going to bring this back down because we're going to say some things that we don't mean, or, you know, that we can't come back from. And you have to also be willing to give that person the space that they need to think about, is this what we're arguing over? Such a big situation that it takes the consequences that may come from it is worth it. And a lot of times it isn't. It's
not. And, you know, based on my experiences, oftentimes things are built up over time that, you know, that might just been the one straw that broke the camel's back.
Right.
But oftentimes it's things that have been building up over a period of time. So communication is important. Healing and divide, coping with estranged families and friends. Episode 42, the Love and Light podcast, Power 103.9 WDKX. We're asking our viewers and our listeners, please text that text line at 585-678-1039 or send us your comments on Facebook, on YouTube. Subscribe to the WDKX YouTube page. We want to hear your comments. We want to hear your questions, topics, potential next show topics, and things of that nature. I think we're going to talk about the Diddy trial when we come back.
Yes,
I think we're gonna break that down.
That's what's happening here across the country, and it's a lot to break down in that particular trial. So it's right now, it's in the middle of it. It's not, it hasn't gone to a jury, it hasn't gone to a verdict, and so we don't know by the time we come back with the next episode if things have been concluded. But I think that there's a lot to unpack there, and we'll see what happens.
So we'll come back with that. Episode 42. This is Willie Lightfoot. Remember, you can't put a lampshade on the light. Keep your light shining.
And this is Lovely Warren. Dance like nobody's watching, sing like there's no one listening, and live like it's heaven on earth.